Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 2. All right, so Scotch Gambit, and then the line, let's review the line that we're covering today. They go knight f6, the most common line, in the most common response to the Scotch Gambit, and we immediately attack it. They attack back is the most common response, and this trade is not to our advantage, so we move our bishop to b5, pinning their knight. They now need to move their knight, which was under attack, jump it, and they usually jump into e4. We take the d4 pawn, so this is no longer a gambit. They go bishop to d7. We trade off our bishop. They take back with the pawn, doubling up their pawns, which is actually an asset here. They end up getting mobilized in a lot of lines. And we castle, because if we don't, things can get bad very fast. They go bishop c5, and we go f3, and we don't worry about the fact that the bishop is staring at our king through that knight. We attack their knight, it backs off, we attack it again, it comes forward, and we basically got a free f4 push without having to lose our turn. And now we want to challenge their knight on e4, but if we do that right now with our knight if we move our knight to d2, they'll just pop off our knight on d4 with check, so we need to protect that knight first with bishop to e3. They castle, and now we challenge their knight. It's kind of hairy for them to keep it there, and their best move here is actually f6. It's slightly better, but it's rarely played. They usually just take, and that's the second best engine move. They take, we take. And then they back off so they can mobilize their doubled pawns. Now, right here, there's like 6 different viable moves, and I explored all of them very deep for like a week before I finally decided I like the knight to b3 version. So we're going to be going down this line. And if they take your bishop right now with their bishop, it's a major blunder. They don't do that very often, though. They need to hit f6. And if they don't hit you with f6 right now, they take a major hit to their score. So they hit you with f6, you take, and now they do need to take your bishop, but they only do it 1% of the time. I'm in 181 games here. 179 times they went queen takes f6. Once they went queen takes e3 check. And now it's not a blunder. Now it's like their top move. But queen takes f6 is right behind it. But now that they didn't trade those bishops off, we're going to stuff our knight in their face and attack their bishop at d7. They really ought to go queen d6 here and not worry about you giving up your knight for their bishop on d7, because we wouldn't want to do that trade anyway. That's a beautiful knight. And the bishop pair is only good when it's good, and here it's not as important as other things. So that knight's really good. They shouldn't worry about me trading it off and move that bishop. They should bring their queen to d6 here as their best move, but moving their bishop to f5 isn't awful. I think it's their second engine move. But after they do that, we snag this diagonal, attacking their queen. They step to the side. They really ought to go queen d6 again here. But they don't. They go queen g6, thinking that putting pressure on c2 will get us distracted. But it won't if we counterstrike correctly. We go rook f3, preparing rook g3, which will skewer the queen to the g7 pawn. That's the threat anyway, if they try and go pop off our pawn on c2. So as soon as we go there, the most common move for them to do is queen d6 finally. And then we need to do b4. If we don't do b4 here, we lose all 72 points of advantage we built up slowly over this game. And if you look, the 2 games that are there, neither one of them did that. They both ended up with equality, and they both lost. So, yeah, b4. Okay, so there's the line. Let's dive into it. All right, so as usual, I'm putting this side by side with my chess mapper program that puts Stockfish scores pre-populated into a depth of 200 million nodes each, so that we can map chess. And each time we step forward and look at a move, it reevaluates all the moves and another 200 million nodes deep, and forgetting the moves behind it. And we keep doing that so that we can see what's good and what's not. So here we go. All right, so knight f6 is the most common move by far, 27% of the time. But if you look at this, this is all ratings. And you'll see knight f6, bishop c5, h6, and d6 are all more than 10% or more. But if you start turning up the rating, you'll see that the higher you go, the more d6 and h6 disappears. It's all the way down at 4%. d6 is down to 12, but it's still played at 2,000 and above. And if you turn it all the way up to 2,500, now you're seeing d6 fall by the wayside at 4%, h6 is down at 0. It's nowhere to be seen. They don't play that move anymore because it's garbage. And knight f6 is 64% and bishop c5 is 26%. So you're getting knight f6 almost 2/3 of the time, more than twice as much as bishop c5. So that will eventually become where you need to put all your focus into once you're able to handle all the other lines down the road against higher rated players. But for now, you're still getting knight f6 the majority of the time. So this is really good for us to cover this. Now, another reason the reason that I think it's popular is these lines with knight f6 are a lot easier to play than a lot of the other Scotch Gambit lines. But it's more than that. So if we back up and we take a look at when we did d4. As a black player, you're pushing e5 and knight c6 if you're going into the Scotch Gambit. And so that means you need to prepare against the Ruy Lopez and the Italian game. So if you look at the Italian game, a lot of people like knight f6 as a response, the two knights defense. And when they do that, white can push d4 and pretty much force you to take. And now you're in the Scotch Gambit, and which line? The knight f6 line. So if you were going to be if you were going to be playing black against the Italian game, would you want to prepare two different Scotch Gambits or one? Yeah, one. So the knight f6 variation is probably more popular there as well because of transpositions. So anyway, let's get back onto, there we go, knight f6. So we push e5. Let's come over to my not so secret weapon anymore here on the side. e4, e5, knight f3 Nc6, d4, e takes d4, bishop c4. All right, knight f6. There are two common responses, castling and e5. And if you look at both of those, e5 and castles, this is at low ratings. We're looking at 39%, 28%, and then everything else is below that. They're both very common. Let's turn up the rating to see what we'll be facing when we get to higher rating levels. And we're going to see them equally. Black needs to prepare for both of those. As white, we get to pick which one we're going to do. But they are both viable. And I mapped very, very deep, trying to decide which one to do, and they were neck and neck, and they're both excellent moves, and unfortunately I can only pick one of them, and if you pick the other, then this video won't be useful to you, because I'm going to do lots of lines down this. So you kind of need to go with the e5 one if you want to follow along on these videos of the Scotch Gambit. So why did I choose the e5 over the castling? It was almost a coin flip, but there were a couple factors that tipped the favor. I prefer the e5 line as my permanent long-term answer. One of them, let's start with the main reason. The main reason is because of the branching on the castling line. Let's look at that. So I castle. Let's see here. All right. Right now at lower levels, we're going to see knight taking, and then three other moves. And if we look over here on the Stockfish scores of all those, it's clear that at higher levels of play, when people are actually getting really good at their openings and preparing stuff ahead of time, they're not going to be choosing bishop c5, bishop e7, or d6. They're going to go knight takes e4. And we can see this if we turn up this rating here. All right, so at 2,500 and above, 77% of people do knight takes e4, and everything else is below 10%. So we can pretty much, so in other words, what we're going to learn now that works against both high and low rated players is what we're going to be stuck with later against high rated players. And I don't want to learn two repertoires, one against lower rated players and one against higher rated players. So I'm on one size fits all so that I can spend less time mapping, so I can have more resources at my disposal to prepare deeper than other players so that I can have that opening book advantage. So here's the problem that I had with the casting line. It's predominantly knight takes e4, which means over here on the side we do knight takes e4. And now if you look, we have to do rook e1. So we do rook e1. And now they have to go d5, so they go d5. And now I have to go bishop takes d5, so I do that. And now they have to go queen takes d5, so they do that. And then right here I have to go knight c3. Everything's very forcing. And here's the problem right here. So we went down one single line, and anytime I do the castle line at higher rating, higher levels of play, I'm going to run into this position. And here's the problem I have with it. 4 moves, all very, very neck and neck and close, and all of them pretty much pointing to equality by my opponent. And if you look at how frequently they're all played, queen a5, queen h5, queen d7, queen d8, the same 4 is over here. 38, 32, 17, 11. I have to learn all of them. And it's funny, Queen F5 is there as well as a top engine move, and it's only played 1% of the time. So if you ever wanted to branch, there you go. If you're playing black, but you don't know if they're going to do the castle variation as wide or if they're going to push E5. I didn't like having to learn 4 lines that are all equal. I want things to be in my favor. So when if you go back and take a look at the E5 line, you don't have that problem. And so that was what tipped the choice for me. So I'm going to do E5. I'm not going to castle. So let's go back over here and E5. All right, so knight E4 is surprisingly good. They could play it 13% of the time and at higher levels. It's 10% as opposed to 83. I mean, they're both equally strong. You want to get someone, make it less likely they're gonna be in book. Map that one if you're playing black. Anyway, but we need to prepare for what's common first. So that's going to be the D5 one. We'll figure out knight E4 later. But black can actually jump in with their knight into the middle now before playing D5 and then doing it, and actually be just as good, which is amazing because you know their D pawn's not pushed and they can have it for free right now. And yet the engines are like, yeah, but it's equal. Knight G4 you're going to find a lot with amateurs, and you get some really good blunders that they can make down that line and win a lot of games there. But let's prepare for D5. So they go D5. And now you've got this exchange that you could do. You can trade pieces. But the engine says, no, you're going to lose 60 points. If you trade, you're going to be at negative 157. Don't do it. Wait, that's E takes D6. Sorry, E takes F6. Good grief, it's even worse. Okay, but anyway, we're going to go bishop B5 because it's the only good move in this position. Trust the engine to map that out. It's a mess. And there's a lot of different threats and counter threats that each side can do, and it's just not worth your time. It's like we'll use calculators today. We don't need slide rules anymore. All right, bishop B5 and then knight E4, 83% of the time. You're going to see a lot. This main line has been mapped out for a very long time by many grandmasters, and you're going to see a lot of, because it's popular, a lot of heavy 83%. They jump in the middle. Then we take here on D4 and get our pawn back, putting pressure on C6, and bishop to D7. You're going to see 70% of the time. Again, a very heavy percentage. Even though, take a look at bishop C5. You know, it's pretty much equal with it, but 28%, 70%. So we're already seeing popularity influence what's common and what you need to prepare for. Lots of branching off points if you wanted to play black, and if you end up down this line to really get good at some of these less popular variations. And today I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I want to make the case that it is not the initial engine score of an opening that is the dominant factor on whether you come out of it with a significant lead. It is your knowledge of it compared to their knowledge of it. If you know it 5 moves deeper than them, like you know it 10 moves deep and they know it 5 moves deep, or you know it 15 moves deep and they know it 10 moves deep, your lead that you're likely to get coming out of that opening dwarfs 20 points or even 70. I mean, I mainline Alekhines defense for that reason. I mean, Sicilian defense gives me a 30-point score as black, and Alekhines gives me a 60. I lose another 30 points right out of the gate. But look at Alekhines defense. Okay, how frequently is that played? Knight F6, 2%. If you're white and you're playing E4, are you going to prepare for that? Or are you going to prepare for E5, C5, D5, E6, C6, D6, G6? You know, all of those are more frequent, a lot more frequent. And if you spend your time working on defending against Alekhines defense, you're going to get stomped by everybody who's playing the mainline stuff. And so even if people know, they go to a tournament and they know you're going to play something like Alekhines defense, they can prepare for that. Or they can prepare for what everyone else is playing. Do they prepare against their one opponent that they know they're going to face? down an obscure line in Alekhein's defense, or are they going to prepare for the other 8 people that they know that they're going to face that are going to be playing Sicilian defense? So you already get a major advantage in the opening by steering it down directions that they're not going to know very well. But what's the new information I'm bringing to the table? The new information is these major, massive, huge point swings that happen that are very counterintuitive and hard to find, they happen on move 5, they happen on move 10, they happen on move 15, they happen on move 20. They keep going all the way to the end game in every single opening all the way through. And this is why you have world champions saying things like stupid computers. It's hard to see these moves even by the best players. And so what I'm trying to say is the obscurity matters. Engine score matters, trickiness matters, minimizing the branching you have to learn matters, and obscurity matters, because the lion's share of what matters coming out of the opening, of what's going to determine whether you come out of the opening with a lead or not, is going to be not how strong your initial score was, but how much better do you know the opening than they do. So that's one of the reasons I play the Scotch Gambit. I get people played a fraction of the time compared to the Ruy Lopez or the Italian game, and I only sacrificed 20 points for that obscurity. That's a very high obscurity score for a very low cost. And in fact, in many of these lines, you pick those points right back up. So anyway, getting back to our line today, e5, d5, bishop b5, knight jumps into the middle, yep, and then we get that pawn back, yes. All right, so they go bishop d7 70% of the time, and that's another reason why I liked the initial, instead of castling, we push e5, because there's not a lot of branching, there's room for mistakes by your opponent despite the minimal branching, and you can drive that line really deep and then to a point where you're going to then, it goes very narrow and then it widens up. So you're going to learn the narrow thing because it's very easy, and then it's going to widen up, and then you're going to learn that, and you're going to have the opening 5 moves deeper than them, and that's going to net you way more than 20 points. So knight takes e4, or knight takes d4. Let's see, where were we? Knight takes d4, bishop to d7. That's where we were, bishop d7. All right, that's the one they do most of the time. Okay, so now we take with the bishop. That's the line that looked the most promising to me, having mapped it much deeper. They take back with the b pawn. That's their top engine move, and their most common move, therefore the most intuitive. We castle, and if we don't castle at this point, things get nasty fast. So we castle. All right. And the most common move, again, 72% of the time, that's my phone alarm. 72% of the time, they're going bishop c5. Bishop e7, only 18. So again, we don't have a lot to learn this line very deep. And we don't usually get a lot of advantage on that. It's not a good or a bad thing. But it does make it a lot less likely that your opponent is going to go all the way down that line that barely branches and then learn a whole bunch at the end of it, whereas you're going to, and you're going to get a big advantage at the end, or very likely to. All right, so bishop c5. So we can push f3, even though it looks a little dangerous with our bishop pointing through our knight at our king. It's not an issue. Our queen's covering our knight, and he can't put another piece on that pinned knight, and so it's not a problem. So we attack their knight. They need to go knight g5, and they do it 96% of the time. We push f4, and then two-thirds of the time they jump right back into e4, and 1/3 of the time they back off, and that's a worse move. So f3, knight g5. They have to do knight g5 here, or they go 132 points behind, and they usually do. And then you play f4, and now they jump right back into e4 with a score of equality. Or they go knight e6, and you have a 33-point lead. So they jump back in the middle, and here we are here. All right, so now we want to challenge that knight with our knight, but if we do that, their bishop will just pop off our knight on d4, so we need to get our bishop out first. Bishop to e3, so we do that. And now, their top move, this is what I'm talking about. We're on move 12, and we just gained 20 points if they don't find queen b8. What the heck is that, and who does it? I mean, let's turn up the score here. Turn up the ratings. How many people are finding queen b8 at 25 at a ranking of 2500 at 2500 and above? 12%. 12% of humans are finding that move. 42% are going bishop b6. 40% are castling, and that's at a rating of 2500. How many of you are above that? I mean, I'm not. So, and if it's only 12% at that point, I mean, how high do you have to go before you find that move naturally as a grandmaster, or you're mapping it and finding it that way? Again, how many people are doing it at these levels? They're not. They're only doing it at very high levels of play because it's such a counterintuitive move this far deep in the opening that they're going to have a lot less chance of having great coverage in it compared to you because you're choosing something that's not what everybody else is playing. All right, bishop e3, and then let's see. Sorry, lost my place for just a minute here. They castle instead of queen b8. Oh yeah, that's why I'm not seeing it. It's way down here. All right, they castle. And that puts our score up to 37 instead of equality. So right here we had equality, 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 and now we're up 30 or 37 depending on which move they do, castling or bishop b6. They need to find queen b8, and we will eventually learn that one just so that we're covered in case they have mapped this and are really good at it, and we need to know how to respond, but it's low priority right now. Castling is the dominant move. All right, so they castle. Now we're 37 points in the lead, actually 32 now that Stockfish gets a little bit closer and takes another look. All right, so knight d2, we recalculated. 200 million nodes each time. All right, so we're at knight d2, which is not a lot actually. All right, now that they've castled, now we challenge their knight because we got our bishop protecting our knight on d4. And now, after we challenge that knight, most of the time they go knight takes d2, giving you a score of 38. 58% of the time. Look at f6, 8% of the time. If they play f6, they get a much better score. And yet, look how counterintuitive that move is defined right now. I mean, their knight's being threatened. They're worried that if you take their knight and they take back, you're going to be able to attack that pawn. They're not going to have a good way to defend it. And you might be able to pop it off, but it's hairy and tricky. I mean, you got a bishop that might be able to get there. We got queens staring down here. Knight takes, pawn takes. The queens are looking at each other kind of. If they push f5, you can capture en passant. If they push f5 to try and defend that. So it's unclear whether they can defend that thing on e4 or not. And the most human reaction is conservative. It's to fear that you won't be able to hold it. And so this is why we buy insurance, right? Something very unlikely could occur, but we're afraid of it happening, so we pay for insurance. Same thing here. They're going to go knight takes d2 the majority of the time, 58% of the time, and the next runner-up is only 17%, because they're worried about what will happen if you take that. Well, if you look over here, having their knight take a d2 is actually the second top engine move, but the top one would have been 18 points better. So anyway, they're going to take most of the time. So they take, and then you take back with your queen because it's your only good move, obviously. Now, we have a branch here. It's 4 moves. All right, queen takes d2. They might do bishop b6, they might do f6, they might do queen e7, they might do rook b8. You've got to learn 4 of them to cover most of it, to give yourself broad coverage. But let's look at what you gain by having the branching here. This is why I don't like a whole bunch of branching where they have equality. If there's going to be branching and I have to learn it, I want a reward for that. So if they go rook b8, a very natural human-looking move, aiming down at your b2 pawn, the engine's just like, yeah, they just dropped 152 points. And you're like, how? And they're like, f5. and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I'm starting to see that. And it's like, yeah, and if you go deeper, it'll be nasty. And you're like, okay, so rook b8 is bad. It takes a lot of calculation. And that's why when we map these openings, we use engines. We don't calculate. Yeah, we use this help, but this help, everyone has it now, and if you don't use it, you're going to be behind the game. Know that there are openings that were studied by every grandmaster on earth, including world champions, for 100 years, and they did not see certain top engine moves in them until computers came along. Do you think you're going to find it over the board? Do you think a grandmaster, just an average grandmaster, is going to be able to find that over the board? That's how much better computers are, and that's how potent these moves are. And so we just need to trust and memorize and then study our openings, then get good at our middle games through general study and our end games through general studies. And if we can map our openings all the way to our end games, oh, awesome, and skip the middle game entirely. That is, if we're trying to win, right? That's our optimal strategy. And some of these do go all the way to the end game. Some of these lines do, which is great because then I know which end games to study, Anyway, all right, so let's see, back to where we were. Rook b8 is not good. Where's rook b8? Let's see. I'll come back a little bit. It was right here. They could have done rook b8. Right, so it happens 12% of the time. You're going to have to learn that line because it does, but your reward is your score goes up 152, and you can punish them hard for it. Queen e7, 90 points ahead. f6, 22% of the time. 46 points ahead. Okay, so f6 and bishop b6, that's your main branch. You got to learn 2 here that don't yield a ton of results. These other 2 get a much better results. I like this spread much better. Anyway, bishop b6. So they back off. Now, all right, so right here, if you look at my engine sneak peek, I picked the 6th top move in this lineup, and this is weird. This is unusual. I went down all of these. I went wide and I went deep. Some of them were on a previous database that I had before I had this one built, and so they don't show up in here when I go into them, like C3 doesn't. I just threw that in the queue, and they don't have scores yet, and they're populating by my little fleet of workers in the background. That'll take a little while. But these others I've mapped pretty, far enough to make a decision. So here's the problem with knight f3 that looks like it's got 42 points against 12. Definitely a better pick, right? Well, 42, that's the top pick. So go back one, and it wasn't 42, it was 36. And go back when it was 37. So 37, 36, 42, and then 26. And that's the top move. If black plays his top move, then it's only 26. And I've highlighted it black here, so these 4 are common. So he goes queen e7, and now it's 29. So we're looking at 29, 26, 42, 36, 37. Get an average of that. Actually, go with the more recent ones and look at the tendency. 42 is clearly a high, like when the stock market jumps before it comes down a little bit. We got a 26 and a 29 as the last 2 reports, and Stockfish can see more now. That's why we trust those more recent ones more. So really, this 42 is 26 or 29, maybe 26, 27, 28, somewhere in there. How about the A4? 26, 26, 38. Go down the 26 line, 18. Whoa, big hit. So, and you sometimes see that in quieter positions. You'll see 5, 10 points swing one way or the other as you're mapping these at a depth of 200 million. If you go to 1 billion or 4 billion or 10 billion, or you get a supercomputer and go up to 1 trillion, you'll get a much clearer idea at this point in time that it's going to take that little hit and go down to 18. And then if you go back here, this will probably be closer to 18 or 20 instead of 37. But I'm going to a lower depth, but then I map and map and map, and that helps me see the picture better and what's going to happen. So this A4 that looks all good is not as good. And that's why this knight b3 that looks like it's only 12 can compete with that one that's really 18. But it's more than that. You got to take all factors into account. So you go knight b3 and you go, what's black likely to respond with if I go knight b3? Well, look at it. f6, 32% of the time, and that gives my score that was 12 is now 11. But look at what happens to the branching here. The queen e7, 32% of the time. If they do that, I'm going to gain 113 points. If they go bishop f5, 22% of the time, I'm going to gain a score of 61. That's nice. So this 32% that they might hit f6, that's a risk we're going to take, a calculated risk. And it's like, well, maybe they planned this ahead of time and they learn our best line and they lead us down here. No, they didn't, or they would have done queen b8 a long time ago. And they would have taken that at a better point in time. So people coming down this line are not going to be in book, because in book, they would have made better moves earlier. And that's another thing I can do as I go down these lines. If I'm going down the optimal line where there's no mistakes, I'm going to be more cautious. I'm not going to pick this f6 possibly, because they might play it. But if they're making little inaccuracies here and there as we go along, I can assume they haven't memorized this line using an engine, which makes it so that the f6 is less of a risk and more of a calculated risk. And plus, what do you risk? Okay, you do that, you got 10 points. You go deeper. These are almost all forced. And look, they lose 20 points right here if they don't find queen d6. So you end up getting the points back. if you explore the line ahead and figure out how it's likely to end. So you look at this knight b3, you look that it's going to be very promising in everything but the f6 line. You go down the f6 line, you see that they pretty much always respond with the exact same moves every time because they're very intuitive, and then they miss an engine move that gives you another 20 points. Now your score's back up to 41 again, and then 33, and now you're looking real pretty, and you come out of this tricky area where there's lots of options by choosing this knight b3 now. If you take a look at some of the others, knight f3, now you have 4 branches, and as you go down them, you look at how they're split, you look at the likelihood they're going to do any one of them, and you look at the score that you're going to get, and then you map deeper and see how it's going to turn out at the end. And that's what you're doing. You are scouting out the forest before that you even lead them into it. And they're all tricky, they're all good, but one of the biggest problems with these others that are above knight b3 is they branch like crazy, and you have to learn tons and tons of lines to protect 10 points. Is it worth it? Knight b3 branches way less, gives you a huge advantage if they don't mess up, or if they do mess up, and their chance of messing up here is 100 minus 32. It's 68% that they're going to mess this up. It's better than a coin flip. And even if they do get it right, then, so let's go down it. So we spent a little bit of time there on the knight b3, so I'm going to choose that one. And it is the most popular one for white to play. So black will be more prepared for it probably. But how many of them are not playing f6? A good number of them. How about at high ratings? How many of them are playing f6 properly? Or all the way up at the top? 50%. You still have a coin flip that they're going to botch it, even at a rating of 2,500. How about if we drop it down to 2,000 and above? Aha, 34%. We can, these moves are hard to find. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about counterintuitive. And then when they do f6, let's continue. So that's our main line is f6. That's the most common thing they're going to play, but it's neck and neck with some of these others with everything selected. They might play queen a7. They're just as likely to. And look at the score. You get a 113-point lead. And if they go bishop f5, you get a 61-point lead. It's beautiful. So you lead them down this line. They go f6, and now you take. I looked at all the others. Taking's the one that is the most dangerous. You take and watch this minimal branching you have to learn. They go f6, you take, and now 99% of the time they take back with the queen. What do they need to do to preserve more of their score? Bishop takes e3 check. A moment ago, that was a blunder. Right here. If they take your bishop, it's a blunder. If they challenge your pawn on e5 with their f-pawn, and you take, now they take your bishop, it's their best move. How many people played it? 1 out of 181 games. 1%. 99% go queen takes f6. Which one would you prepare against? Let's go queen f6. So they do queen f6. It's pretty much, you can almost guarantee no branching here. They're going to go queen f6 and lose 20, well, do the quick math, 8 points there. But, you know, you go deeper and it's not. And now it's 20. And you go on that one and it's only 6. So, yeah, that would have been the better choice for them. Bishop takes e3 check. So you go queen takes. Now, because they didn't take that bishop at that key moment, right after you took that pawn, their attention's on the f6 pawn. They're not looking anymore at the bishop. A moment ago, it was a blunder. They probably worked that out if they didn't do it. And now they're hesitant to do it. So they take back with the queen. And then what do? You stuff your knight in their face, your top move here, 20 points ahead. Everything else is worse. And if you go deeper, it starts giving him the lead. And it branches off with how many options he have that are equality? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, thank you. I don't want that branching. I want this branching. Knight c5. Look at that. 22, 41, 45. And they're only going to play bishop f5 probably. So at this point, you stuff your knight in their face and grab that c5 spot because they didn't trade bishops. And your knight is beautiful. And if he trades it off, now your bishop's got the dark squares. And it's putting pressure on a7. It's raking across all over the board. It's blocking the 2 pawns in front of it. And he doesn't have a corresponding black bishop or knight to challenge it. And he can't challenge it with his queen diagonally. And so that bishop ends up just owning that whole section. So once you stuff that knight there, it's either the knight is in his face or your bishop is in his face and is beautiful. That's why the engine's liking it. So, and then look at this. That knight's so good there, after you stuff it in his face at c5, that he's going to again miss the top move. Bishop f5, 74% of the time they play bishop f5. 8% of the time they take. That's even worse. Where's that one at? Let's see. Bishop takes c5 right there. 101, even worse. How many of them are going to find queen to d6? Ready? 3%. So you're attacking their bishop. Maybe they're thinking, hey, I got the bishop pair. I don't want to lose that. This is an open position. That's a generality. And the problem with general rules is they ignore nuance. And nuance, chess is a game of nuance. So there's times that the double bishop is powerful, and there's a lot of times that it's not. And knowing the difference, good luck. It can be very, very tricky, even for top-level players. So it's really about the whole position. And this weakness on c5 is your advantage. It's why you're 41 points ahead now. So he usually goes bishop f5, putting pressure on c2 and getting the bishop out of reach of your knight on all of its squares, and trying to make it so that if the knight tries to jump anywhere, your bishop can pop it off. That's the instinctive and intuitive move by humans. It's also wrong. Bishop f6. Okay, so now you have two good options. I chose bishop d4, attacking the queen. Now their queen goes to g6 the majority of the time, losing even more points. Check this out. 77% of the time, they move the queen to g6 instead of d6, 23% of the time. And if they go to d6, that's their top engine move, and they got a score of 33. Everything else doubles your lead. So here's what's funny. If you go back, right here after that trade, and you stuff the knight in their face, they should go queen d6 here. It's their top engine move. Instead, they go there. You attack their queen. Now they should do queen d6. It's their top engine move. They don't. They go there. Now you threaten them with g3, threatening to go to, f3, threatening to move to g3, pinning their queen to the g7 pawn with your bishop backing it up. And finally, they go queen d6. So, and each time, it's the top move. And they only see it on the third attempt. So, they go queen g6 here. And now the scores look like that. Queen g6. Queen g6. Okay. White usually is c3. White usually panics here. He's got black's got two pieces on their c2 pawn. And the most common move white does is they push the pawn at c3 so that it's not in danger. But now look at what will that do? c3, if you play that, your lead goes from 77 to 11. You need to go rook f3. That's by far the best move here. I even looked at a4. Here's what it looks a little bit deeper. 27, 40, 46, 53. Those are the options we're giving black. Or we could go rook f3 and give them these options. 72, 86, 102. And these top two are the most common two. They get a branching of 2, but we get a much better score and we take the lead. So we need to go rook f3 and ignore the threat to c2 and instead counter-strike after his, ignore his strike and strike back. So we're not going to do c3. We're going to go rook f3 right there. And white finds that less. And look at the loss rate. White performs badly after rook f3. And so people go by these scores and then they ditch this line saying it doesn't win a lot. And it's because white's bungling it. And we're going to see that. This is another example of what I was saying about how it's more important that you know you're opening much better than your opponent if you want to achieve your objective, which is to come out of the opening with a substantial lead. To achieve that objective, the number one priority, the number one dominant factor is you know it better than them, a lot better than them, preferably. And that's a lot more important than having a good opening at the very get-go. So, and we're going to see that right here. Right here, the most common move is queen d6. They've delayed it twice. They're taking it up the third time because, this rook to g3 is looking nasty. So they finally move their queen and they go to d6. And now black wins. There's only 2 games this deep and black won them both. Let's take a look at queen d6. And now what does white have to do? This is what I'm talking about. Here we are, 20 moves in. 73 points, free for the taking, whoever wants it. If white knows to play b4 here, white keeps the lead. No games went that way. Instead, they went queen c3 and rook g3. Let's take a look at those two on the score sheet over here. Go back. Queen c3, rook g3. Equality. White settled for equality on move 20 by playing something besides b4, and then they went on to lose in both games that reached this far. So we're not going to do that. We're going to learn b4. And we are now at our endpoint because there are no games found. Unfortunately, this line, unlike the last one we covered, did not end in checkmate. But it does end at a point in time where you have successfully reinforced your c5 knight, that if he takes, he gets replaced by a nasty bishop that he cannot dislodge with his queen or his bishop or his rooks, that tie up his entire queen side, and dominate the position enough that the engine is saying you've got a lead of 72 or 94 or 96. You succeeded. You came out of the opening with a dominant lead here if you go down this line. So that is the first line against Nf6, driven all the way until we run out of data. And thanks for joining me, and hope to see you next time. Bye.